This is Pixar's greatest character. Now, before you go to the comments and tell me why I'm completely wrong, allow me to explain. When I say the greatest character, I don't mean the one who's the most creative, the most likable, or even the most popular. Because Anton Ego is none of those things. He isn't the protagonist. Heck, he isn't even the main antagonist. In fact, this infamous food critic only shows up for around 10 minutes in all of Ratatouille. But Anton Ego's greatness isn't defined by his time on screen. Anton Ego is great because, well, to explain it to you, I have to tell you a story. A story that involves Star Wars, Steve Jobs, and ugly babies. But I promise that everything will make sense, because by the end of the video, you'll see why Anton Ego is the most meaningful character Pixar has ever created.
Amusing title, Anyone Can Cook. What's even more amusing is that Gusteau actually seems to believe it. I, on the other hand, take cooking seriously, and no, I don't think anyone can do it.
Anton Ego is introduced at the start of the movie as the most influential and menacing food critic in all of France. He's self-serious, egotistical, and inspires fear with the scathing reviews that he writes. When we first see him typing up his latest critique at home, we immediately notice his appearance. The jet black hair, the pale skin, the sunken eyes, the hollow cheeks, the red wine that looks like blood. And this extends to his surroundings as well. The office where he works is shaped like a coffin, his typewriter looks like a human skull, and the reviews he hangs on his walls resemble hunting trophies of his victims. Which makes sense, at least metaphorically, because as a food critic, Anton Ego feeds off of the work of others. He holds incredible power to make or break the restaurants that he judges, and he has no issue destroying any chef that he deems unworthy. As we see earlier, it was one of his negative reviews that led to the death of Gusteau.
Gusteau's restaurant lost one of its 5 stars after a scathing review by France's top food critic, Anton Ego. It was a severe blow to Gusteau, and the broken-hearted chef died shortly afterwards.
Anton Ego is death personified. The grim eater, the one who sets the rules and calls the shots. Which then begs the question, what do you serve to the man who's seen everything that fine dining has to offer?
Ratatouille? It's a peasant dish. Are you sure you want to serve this to Ego?
The ratatouille is brought to Anton and he readies his pen for his review. But then, he takes a bite. The taste of this peasant's dish awakens something inside him, transporting him back to a simpler time when food didn't need to be fancy or expensive to be worthwhile. This character transformation is beautifully animated by the team at Pixar through the change in his facial expressions and his pen falling to the ground. But then comes the grand reveal, that the meal he just ate was cooked by the unlikeliest of chefs. For a man who refused to believe that anyone can cook, he's now confronted with the fact that great cooking can come from anyone. When he returns home that night, he decides, for the first time, to use his voice and his influence to raise up another artist by writing a review that lends credibility to Remy, even if it comes at the expense of his own.
The restaurant was closed and Ego lost his job and his credibility. But don't feel too bad for him. He's doing very well as a small business investor. He seems very happy.
How do you know?
Wait, so is Anton Ego a hero? I like to think so. Because without Anton sacrificing his own career and investing in Remy's new restaurant, there would be no Le Ratatouille. Which is, I believe, the heart of the movie. Because underneath the action, humor, and romance, Ratatouille is a film about the discovery of talent in the unlikeliest of places. As Anton writes in his review,
"Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere."
Which just might be the most important theme in any Pixar movie. Ever. Why is this message so important? Well, let's take a look at the origins of Pixar. Pixar started as the computer graphics division of Lucasfilms, a team hired by George Lucas that focused on creating animation and special effects for his movies. Fun fact, this is why there's so many Star Wars references in Toy Story. This group, led by a brilliant computer scientist named Ed Catmull, had a dream of creating the first full-length computer animated film. But at the time, it seemed like an impossibility because of how expensive and technically challenging it would be.
John and Ed were dead set on making animated films, and their dream was to make an animated feature. And I said, great, but to do this on a grand scale, it's going to take at least $30-40 million investment, which we don't have.
When George Lucas attempted to sell Pixar in 1985, there were very few interested buyers, and even fewer who wanted to support their ambition to create an animated film. The only investor that did was a 31-year-old entrepreneur named Steve Jobs, who saw the potential of the technology that Ed and his team were building. And so, in 1986, Steve Jobs bought Pixar from Lucasfilms for $5 million, and then invested an additional $50 million over the following years as Pixar worked on creating their full-length animated feature. When Toy Story released on Thanksgiving weekend in 1995, it revolutionized the entertainment industry and set Pixar on its path to where it is today. Yet what I find most inspiring about this story is the people that made it all happen. Ed Catmull was a computer engineer by trade and had never made a full-length film before in his life, much less an animated film. And John Lasseter, the man who directed Toy Story, was previously fired from Disney for pitching a computer animated project that was deemed too experimental and ambitious. And yet this team of outsiders ultimately found someone who believed in and supported their vision. And that made all the difference. In Creativity Inc., a book written by Ed Catmull about Pixar's creative principles, there's a chapter called The Hungry Beast and the Ugly Baby, which talks about the importance of supporting new ideas. In it, he writes, "The new needs protection. The challenger needs support to find its footing. And protection of the new, of the future, not the past, must be a conscious effort. New ideas are like ugly babies. They need those to protect them, to support them, and to believe that they will one day grow up to be something beautiful." This idea of protecting the new, of championing true artistry and creativity, is at the very core of Pixar's DNA. Because nearly 40 years ago, Ed Catmull and his team were in search of someone to step in and support a group of unproven artists on a crazy new idea that others have rejected. And they found him. A man who invested both spiritually and financially in their vision because he believed in their potential to be great. In other words, they found their Anton Ego. For without him, Pixar would have never existed. And so, who better to close out this video than the character who has meant the most to the company that created him?
In many ways, the work of a critic is easy. We risk very little, yet enjoy a position over those who offer up their work and themselves to our judgment. We thrive on negative criticism, which is fun to write and to read. But the bitter truth we critics must face is that in the grand scheme of things, the average piece of junk is probably more meaningful than our criticism designating it so. But there are times when a critic truly risks something, and that is in the discovery and defense of the new. The world is often unkind to new talent, new creations. The new needs friends. Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere.
Hey. Believe me, that story gets better when I tell it, okay? Come on, bring some food over here. We're starving.